Welcome to Revenue Search, another episode of one of Bittensor's finest podcasts. Normally, it's me and my co-host Siam as we dig in to Bittensor and her subnets. I think that today's episode might be a little bit different. Siam, who have we got? What's happening?
We have the guru. So I think most people have followed a similar entry path into Bittensor. And after dismissing Bittensor for a good 6 months, and then I saw Barry was in it, I was like, oh, holy shit, I need to get into this. And back then, the only font of all knowledge, the font of all source information for Bittensor was Keith. And I think so many people got sucked into the Bittensor Guru podcast. He's like a wallet ninja, and he's got positive vibes. And I love anyone with positive vibes. So I am a massive fan of Keith, and it's an honor to have you, sir.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me on. I feel like this is, a passing of the torch into some more capable hands. But yeah, it's been 2 years roughly since I started the podcast, and my episodes now are only every month or two. I really only bring on, the teams at this point that are like the heaviest hitters in the ecosystem that I want to let have kind of that like spotlight for a couple months in people's podcast rotation. So that's kind of how I've shifted the strategy of the podcast. But yeah, my entry into Bittensor was 3.5 years ago almost now.
Wow.
And it all started with a $2 Patreon donation to a guy called Michael Garfield. And he did a podcast, Future Fossils, has a couple hundred episodes, and now does one called Humans on the Loop. But I was listening to his podcast all the time, so I gave him $2 a month to get into his Discord. And I had to download Discord. Like I didn't know what it was at the time. I'm not like a developer. I wasn't into any kind of online chat or anything at that point. And then in there, I was just, chatting about everything from crypto to psychedelics and everything else. It's a really fun kind of Discord server. And then a guy named Rian was also in there who runs another Discord called Reincarnation. And Reincarnation has like, a dozen of the earliest miners of Bittensor. So I eventually made my way from one Discord to another, got let into the private Bittensor channel within that Discord after proving I wasn't a scammer for a couple months. And then once I found Tao through Reincarnation, there was really no going back. Actually, I tell the story. I started mining, and I mined 7 Tao. And and then I had 3 miners, and they got deregistered, and I was just like, screw this, I'm done with Bittensor. I sent my Tao to somebody and quit, and then like over the next month, I kept going back to the white paper over like the next month, and repilled myself. So it didn't take me quite 6 months to come back around. Just in 1 month, I came back around and started putting everything I had into the thing. It just made sense. ChatGPT launched 6-7 months later, and the rest is history.
Wow. And what's happened with your hair, mate? Honestly, you used to have these lovely flowing locks. You're like Samson. Hopefully your mojo hasn't disappeared with
No,
your
I
hair.
still got the mojo, I hope. I cut the hair because I started growing it out at the end of my corporate career. I worked in logistics and supply chain for 12 years. And really the last like couple years were really freaking painful. I was in an SAP implementation of some software that was like going to eat everything I had built over the beginning of my career. And just the lack of flexibility in that project, and really what led me to believe in something like Bittensor and the openness of it was very frustrating at the time. So I started growing my hair out, wearing funny shoes to work, like I was trying to rebel without quitting my job. Eventually I did quit the job, and I kept the hair. My wife and I had our first kid a little over a year ago, and I just kind of realized like a month or two ago, like, what am I rebelling against anymore? I'm in this world. I'm here for it. I'm gonna just slice it off and go low maintenance.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So before we get into start chewing the fat about Bittensor and stuff like that, you mentioned psychedelics. So do you mind if we explore this a bit, Mark?
No. Oh, Mark, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Knock yourself out.
So elaborate. Ayahuasca, psilocybin, like what? Psilocybin absolutely fascinates me.
Ayahuasca, yeah, I haven't been on a ayahuasca retreat for a few years now, but a couple ayahuasca retreats. One, the most like mind-bending one at a place called Blue Morpho, run by a guy named Hamilton Souther. I've done his podcast a couple times, actually, talking about AI.
Yeah.
But man, I was really as straight as they come, up until my early 30s. So like, whiskey collection, no weed involved in my life at all, no psychedelics. Actually, like the high school that I went to and the college, I went to University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. And the group that I was in there, really, there was no psychedelics. So a lot of people might like get an introduction to that type of thing at like an Ivy League university, maybe, or maybe a West Coast university where those things are around. In the Midwest, it's just about like drinking and probably cocaine. Like it's like very basic stuff. And everyone's sorry, go ahead.
Basic.
Well, yeah, I just mean like run of the mill, like non-mind expanding, either hype your way up or dumb your way down, or it's really a sad state of affairs, I guess. I'm sure things have changed there over at U of I now. I have no idea what's going on lately, but anyway, really towards the end of my 20s, like I was struggling again with that like corporate career, and I was doing a couple years in Germany actually on an expat deal with the company I worked for at the time, and I was only 2 hours driving from Amsterdam. So like every month or two, I would drive up to Amsterdam and buy a bunch of weed, and then drive back down. I later learned that this was very, very risky, and that the German police kind of look for this, but somehow I got away with it every time. And I would just use that as kind of like weed's a difficult one because it's kind of like a self medicating thing that can really get you in trouble if you do too much of it, and it's kind of demotivating. But if you use it in the right way, it can also be very mind expanding and allow you to do a lot of introspective work on kind of analyzing your place in the world and thinking about different ideas that would never come up if you're drinking a scotch, and I know because I drank a lot of scotch for a long time, and I never thought about the things I thought about, when I would smoke a joint. So like eventually I did that for a while, and I started to realize I was going to quit my job at some point, and I knew that I had to get out of that corporate career. It's the golden handcuff thing, like, and you guys are probably more still in maybe the traditional world a little bit. You have 1 foot over there at least, and 1 foot in Bittensor, it seems like to me. But like, you're making well into the 6 figures, and you got a good life, and you don't have to try that hard at your job. I'm sure you meet people like this all the time, and maybe they're 30 years old and their life is sort of like laid out in front of them. Easy. You're on easy street. You essentially like made it, and that's where I was at. I was a director, like with the company, and making a bunch of money, and like had enough where I couldn't really even spend it properly. And I'm just like, this can't be it. And so after my time in Germany, I went back to the US, and I moved back into the same neighborhood, and I lived on a river, and I built a better house, and I bought a better boat, and I like upgraded everything, with all the money. And I'm like, I was happier when all this shit was like, I was happier 10 years ago, and my boat sucked and my house was falling apart. And like, I realized that wasn't going to be the path, and that's when I started looking for other ways in my life to kind of like expand my involvement sort of in the world and think about it in different ways and get outside of just like the stacking up the dollars. And at that point I was stacking up a little bit of Bitcoin too, but that also kind of just felt like the safe track. And that's when I started. So you mentioned psilocybin. That's when I started growing some mushrooms. And I did a big, home. I can talk about this stuff now because since I've had my child, my house is completely clean and my body is completely clean. So I'm not risking anything from the authorities at this point. But so I feel like I'm free to talk about it. Yeah, like I grew all these mushrooms, and I grew so much, like it was really an insane amount. I don't even want to say how much because I didn't really know like what I was going to get out of it. but I had enough that I was just like able to experiment to the full extent of my curiosity without taking any kind of risks of going, to any drug dealer or whatever else you have to do to, like, because I also wasn't in those circles. So I didn't know who to call to get mushrooms, like my friends didn't know. So I had to create my own sort of opportunity there.
Just imagining Breaking Bad, but Keith with
Yeah, much less organized, that's the thing. With the mushrooms, your hands are kind of in the dirt and everything. There's no like chemist, there's no lab involved. So you got the craziest thing you got to do is you get a dehydrator out and dry them when they're ready to be harvested or whatever. But so I started to kind of develop this like protocol to go very deep internally using the mushrooms. And just to give a plug for meditation, because actually when this podcast, when you guys start this thing, you give the 5-minute countdown, you play some very relaxing music. So I was just sitting here, just preparing for the podcast with a little brief meditation session. But I tried that before I went to the mushrooms, and I meditated for over 100 days in a row. And I got like basically nowhere, like I tried to do it the yogi way, and I couldn't do it. So I was just like, I gotta do the mushrooms. So I did the whole mushroom thing, and I started developing this protocol essentially where I would take these like heroic doses of mushrooms and go into complete darkness, complete silence, complete like, no sensory perception at all, almost like a float tank, but not in the float tank. And that's when you start honestly having to face yourself at a very different level than you maybe do anywhere else other than like the chair with the psychiatrist or something, or you really have to like do it to really experience it. But it will change the way that you see the world, that you see your life, make you face the things that you're doing in a very different and honest and inescapable, very painful sometimes way. And you face everything that you grew up with and that you've experienced and the pain you've caused and the love it's all there, and so I did that for a few months, and then eventually got to the point where I wanted to do the ayahuasca thing, because I wanted to like kind of like up level the experience. I'd reached not that you can really reach a maximum with psilocybin. I think you can get to the same places, but it's just a little bit less organized and less, I would say less like extreme than the ayahuasca thing. So that's when I went down to Costa Rica first, and eventually Peru, and did that. And that's just everything else I described, but on a totally different level. And I don't need to give any like trip reports or anything, but like, and I don't think it's also something that's meant for everybody. So like, as I'm describing this, if this doesn't resonate with you, it probably maybe isn't meant for you at this point, or maybe ever, I don't know. But for people that are kind of interested in this type of stuff, it's a very rewarding experience if you go in, with your mind open, and the ability to be, introspective and influenced and put your ego aside and that type of thing. These type of things can really set you on a path, and reorient and orientate your life in a way that you'd have a very difficult time doing yourself, because we all come into this world in a certain position with our upbringing and our parents and our education and our whatever society or country we're living in, and you don't really realize it until you start taking a look at it. But there's so much programming around who you are that it takes decades to really unravel it all, and that's what I'm still trying to do to this day, is kind of like figure out who Keith is, when you strip all this stuff away. And I think we'll all probably figure out who we are when we die. But the idea is to hopefully get there a couple decades earlier, so you can really kind of experience and move through this world as who you really are. So it's a long story, I know. I will end it now, I guess, by just saying that the progression for me also moved into something called from ayahuasca to DMT, dimethyltryptamine. And that's like, essentially the pinnacle, or maybe 5-MeO DMT is maybe the pinnacle of psychedelic experience. It's like the tallest roller coaster at the park. It's very, very difficult to go into those spaces and maintain your sanity. But the things that you encounter there, guys, are essentially aliens from another dimension, and they're real and they communicate with you. And I'm probably going to sound crazy to most people at this point, but you have to remember where I'm coming from. I'm telling you, I never really experienced any kind of magic in my life for like the first 30 years. I was as materialist and as straight-laced as they come. And going into these spaces, coming from that, I can tell you, and then now coming back out into sort of this cleaner lifestyle with my child and everything. All that stuff there that you hear about is real. It'll blow your mind. And yeah, I don't know.
Awesome. Okay. This is good. I forgot to say at the beginning, if wherever you're watching this from, on Twitter or YouTube, if you have any questions for Keith, just make a comment, because it does pop up in here, and we'll obviously ask any pertinent things. So, Mark, what is your first question for the guru?
Well, I mean, this is unscripted. This is no agenda, which is unfortunate, really, because we're 20 minutes in and we're talking about aliens. But I think we need to move on to Bittensor at some point. I think that's really where we need to go.
Yeah.
Well, let's start off with the question that has got the most valuable answer, and that question really is: how does Bittensor attract more capital into its ecosystem? What needs to happen in order for more eyes and more attention to be focused on this ecosystem, for more capital to pour in? What can we do to help? What can we do to make that happen?
What we could do to help is put people on a platform that are delivering value through the products that they're creating with their subnets, right? And essentially, like, this is going to come in really only one way at this point, because everybody is, I would say, sort of fatigued within the ecosystem. There's been many kind of saviors that have come and gone. The capital doesn't seem to be flowing in, at least in a price affecting way, any more than it was 2 years ago. You can go look at the price from almost 2 years ago to the day, and we're trading at nearly the same price. Granted, we've emitted a lot of tokens at that point, so it's been good to kind of maintain that level. But the only way that we're going to bring people in, and I was actually talking to somebody else about this an hour ago or so, is one of these subnets is going to have to break out with a combination of utility, performance, affordability that stacks them up and then demolishes the competition that exists out there. And we can go through the top 20, we can click through them real quick, but I can just give it to you right off the top of my head. The number one opportunity for this is, of course, Ridges, because mainly what we're dealing with here is people that use these coding applications have a very, very low effort to switch, and they're used to switching between providers, comparing performance between providers. And they're also used to paying thousands and thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. It's whatever it is, between 25 and 75% of all the tokens that are generated, nobody really knows, is for coding. These are our people, So if we can get them on Bittensor through Ridges, that's the number one way. And I think that's the number one way we're going to break out of sort of the echo chamber that we're in right now.
Gateway
drug.
Sort of.
Say it again.
Ridges is the gateway drug. It's the weed.
It is. Ridges is the weed of the Bittensor ecosystem. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if Shaq appreciates that. Maybe he does. I don't know. He's 21. Probably does. But yeah. So then the other, it doesn't have to be Ridges necessarily, but the other options are sort of like less sexy. Like I fully believe that Hippius also is an opportunity, because the storage thing, you can't deny it. Everybody uses it. Like you guys said on the podcast with him, the TAM is essentially everybody and everything and every company. But the problem is with the storage stuff, it's a little bit harder to get somebody to unplug and switch and move their stuff over. So you're dealing with kind of a different customer. Sometimes they're very comfortable with their existing provider. But that's another one. And outside of that, we have to get the products out there. And Shoots, of course, is like the number one example of this. The problem is, what percent of people are using open source models as their daily driver for interacting with artificial intelligence? I don't know, but it's less than 10% for sure of AI users, you know, like maybe it's less than 5%. I don't know what those numbers are. They're probably not even available. Which is why we need somebody like Ridges, and why you see the, you know, the price action that you do, is because that's the way that we're going to exit this thing. And also the cryptocurrency ecosystem at this point, everybody's tired. You can go look at the token. I mean, it's kind of like this trope now that like there isn't going to be another bull market. You know, like maybe you think we're in one now because Bitcoin has done what it's done, but not that many things have followed Bitcoin. On the way up to over 100K, and the money is like tired. It's been scammed, you know. Many people have been scammed, you know, a handful of times, dozen times or whatever, with these various companies that have gone under or projects that have gone under. So unless you deliver now, you're never going to exit, you know, the stratosphere. You're never going to go into orbit. You just gotta freaking deliver, and that's what we need.
That's the way it's going to happen, because you're right. It's a frustrating situation, isn't it? We just see the same money just rotating around. When you have a hot subnet, it just takes everything from colder subnets, and it's just the same money moving around. We need a way of bringing capital in, and I think you're right. I think Ridges is the easiest one. And I hadn't thought about it in terms of how easy it is for the users of that application to switch, because I guess that we're the type of people that switch just for fun. And I think there's a lot of people that do not have that momentum.
Yeah, I have a couple of you know, AI podcasts in the rotation, and those guys switch all the time. That's what they're doing all the time. You know, they use this one for this type of coding. They use this one for this. They know it, and that's their job. So like those guys are smart, and they're also frugal usually. You know, so if we get there with that, and we use the emissions to bootstrap the affordability on top of the Targon and Shoots for the compute, we will get there. And we will have a breakout subnet, and it's going to be a little scary when it happens, because it's going to eat a huge part of the emissions. It's going to make everyone feel a little bit nervous about, hey, I'm not sure if we should have 30% of our emissions, 40% of our emissions going into a single subnet. But I do think that we'll have, and I don't know if it'll be Ridges or not, but I do think we'll have one of these unicorns that sort of figures out the flywheel thing and starts putting the revenue back into the alpha price. Or just starts using the alpha as the, you know, credits for using the product, or however they end up doing it with Ridges, and that ends up setting us sort of free, because it creates the FOMO, creates the demand, and creates the spotlight on the ecosystem for the rest of the subnets.
Well, we are big fans of Ridges. Ridges is our largest holding, isn't it, in DSV?
Yep.
It's my largest holding too, honestly.
Yeah.
You know, as far as Tau is concerned, in the value of Tau, Ridges is also my largest holding.
Yeah. And I've said it a few times before, you can do a rough sort of rule of thumb or finger in the air estimation of a future price of it, you know, say top 5 or top whatever. And ages ago, back when Ridges was like 0.02, I thought this will be easily top 10, maybe top 5. And I sort of looked at, you know, we're in a suppressed sum of subnet, or sum of alpha, you know, 1.06. And so you could, you know, I guess that secondary equation is price equals sum of subnets times emissions. So I thought, okay, well, what's top 3, you know, and in a detailed bear market, you know, that's like 5% emissions. In a bull market for detail, that's 10 to 15% emissions. So you can then just do, okay, let's say sum of subnets is 2 times 10, you know, 10%, etc. And it gives you a price. And like I originally said that, you know, 0.05 would be a good sort of base level price for Ridges, and it just literally shot through that. And so personally, you know, I cannot see. I think like 0.2%, 0.2 as a price is like a very high probability target. Now, we don't often talk about, you know, price targets and whatnot, but when you just work out, you know, let's say position 2, position 1, and then bull market for detail, it's highly probable in my opinion. But
yeah, and the other thing I would say is that it's doing it the right way, because it's generating intelligence as the value, and it's not doing it with compute. So nobody knows how these guys come up with their code that they're adding to the, I don't know how many character, or it was like 7,000 lines or something a month ago. I don't know what it is now. I know they just released this kind of new incentive mechanism using some harder questions from Swebench and something called Polyglot, I believe, which I'm not even sure exactly what that thing is, but something probably like Swebench. They're doing it the right way because there is no underlying commodity that's being paid for by the miners other than just the real estate in their mines. And so you don't, as a miner, you can afford to believe in the subnet without having to dump the alpha that you just earned because you spent a couple hours on it. Likely you're able to bootstrap that with your day job or whatever else. And the other thing that they're doing right is they have the ability to take models that have already been developed by the open source community and leverage the existing intelligence within them to go after the larger players. Show me another, project anywhere where we are extracting that type of value from the open source models that can be run on smaller machines. And everyone's wondering, hey, when I create an open source model on 9, on 3, on Bittensor, like, how are we going to monetize these things? What's the path to this? This is the path. Like, cram enough intelligence into this very efficient small model compared to the larger ones. Use these larger agents on top rather than a thin agent layer that you have in a large model underneath.
Yeah.
Use a giant not giant, but very intelligent agent on top and a smaller model underneath. And you can leverage all of the work of tens of thousands of people in the open source community. And every time one of these models gets better, Ridges gets better. Every time Ridges gets better, it extracts a little more intelligence from the models. It's one of the ways that open source beats everybody else, is this agent layer on top,
Yeah. What are your thoughts? So obviously you have to red team every time you have a strong conviction in something, you should spend 90% of your brain glucose in figuring out why you're wrong. And whenever I try and red team the Ridges, thing, one of the questions I can't sort of get out of my head is, what if Anthropic and Cursor, they are the miners of Ridges, and they've just gone, actually, we can just extract all of this money from Bittensor, and we'll get it right up just below Claude or Opus, etc., and then we'll just leave it there, and then we won't let it go. Like, what are your thoughts on that critic that I've seen in the past?
The thing is about big companies is they're too dumb to do that. And maybe they're listening to this, maybe not. I don't care. But they don't and they have red companies are now smart enough. Now they have internal red teams kicking the tires on their own products and everything. Yeah. But they're very rarely creating internal organizations that go undermine their competitors by like actively subverting their products.
Yeah.
And so, no, I don't think that they're doing that. I think that that ego and the size of them and the success of them at this point and the hundreds of billions in valuation will just allow us to continue to fly under the radar until almost like a little drone army comes in and takes out all the tanks, that's essentially what we're doing. Is we're using something that costs 0.01% of what they have to destroy the thing that costs $100 billion. So I'm not worried about that. I mean, also the real intelligence in artificial in essentially developing our artificial intelligence lies in the people, and the people in their heart will do the best things for their wallet, unfortunately or fortunately. And that comes in the form of those guys from Anthropic, from whatever other companies, moonlighting on Bittensor, which we already know is happening. So we are every development, big guys, I'm telling you, we are subverting you. It doesn't feel like it yet, but you have a leech on your ass, and it's sucking the blood from your company in the form of its intelligence. And every time you do something better, you can't stop your people from wanting to go make 70K a day on Ridges, because you don't pay them enough. You've tried to now pay these, the people are being paid 7-8 figures to join some of these companies, some of these AI companies. That's one guy. Underneath that one guy, there's hundreds or thousands that are hungry, that aren't getting those paydays, that are still in the 200, 300, 400K range, that feel like they're contributing at a level that would earn them millions, and they can go earn those millions on Bittensor. And
Nice. Sorry, go for it, Mark.
No, you go.
Okay, so I have a little theory that when the crypto bull market happens, so let's say we have this run off top, boom, everything crashes 30, 50, 90%. I have a theory that DTAL won't give a shit. I think it will be completely disconnected from all traditional risk on assets, and that we have seen already a strong uncorrelation from major markets, because subnets, the price of a subnet is dictated by the liquidity pool. And obviously we have our own little microcosm here. Yes, they're rotational bags and whatnot, but now subnet caps will be lifting at some point in the relatively near future, and therefore we already know the short to medium term life sort of cycle of a subnet. The price crashes. It's crazy for the first couple of months. Root prop is crashing down fast. We know what that life cycle is for the first, short to medium term. So I think what we don't know is, the long-term outcome of a subnet. Every subnet chart looks identical until boom, it's bled out, bottomed out, and then they do all whatever. What is your take on that?
We're going to see a lot of these subnets, probably 100 of the current 128, bottom out and never come back.
Elaborate.
But it's 80-20. They're just not going to be producing something that's worth people to put their Tau into. And as more tools come out for the consumer, which is essentially my involvement with Tau.com and what they're building, but the consumer access point for decentralized artificial intelligence, a consumer is, looking for something that they can understand. And I would say if there's 25 subnets that a consumer can understand right now, that's high. And everyone's going to do their best to make sure that we can translate what these guys are trying to do into something that's consumable and digestible by the average person. But there's just 100 subnets where you're not going to be able to do that, and that's, they're going to have to face the unfortunate reality of either producing something that is consumable and desirable and has demand, or they're going to get tossed into the wood chipper. And when we put that deregistration back on, which is a critical component of Bittensor at every level, from validating to mining, and the fact that we shut it off for subnets for a few months here is just like a blip in the radar. When it comes back on, it will never be shut back off. And in about 6 months, we're going to see a rotation of 40 to 50 subnets. When I've done the math on it roughly, and we're going to see about 35 of the existing subnets be deregistered, probably 10 to 15 of the new subnets that are come in, be deregistered after their 4-month sort of like grace period, immunity period. And then we're going to have done some house cleaning. We're going to be a lot cleaner. And then over the next 6 months, we're going to do it again. And this project is going to look completely different. If you go back to what the subnet rotation sort of looked like in the deregistrations that was happening prior to dynamic Tau, people don't really realize this, but we went through hundreds of subnets. I had 3 subnets. Nobody knows. What
were your subnets?
Well, I did 2 on cellular automata. And that, just turns out from a monetization standpoint to be a very long shot. But, Google Conway's Game of Life if you want to, figure out what cellular automata is. But that was a different time for Bittensor. It was really more about just exploring how to build subnets and everything like that. And we're going to go back to that wood chipper cycle of hundreds and hundreds of subnets that are now, the 128 now are going to all get recycled. 100 of them will, for sure, over the long enough time period. And if they don't, I have because someone had like you said, a liquidity protect them for a very long time from being deregistered. But eventually, let's start, having this mechanism and capturing more emissions. That's the mechanism and bring them that's going to take care of this. I see dead subnets, these like zombie subnets around that act through the protocol necessarily, all of them. You have to solve it through the market coming in and pumping up the real producers and the value contributors.
Yeah.
think there might be a cat sat on your Starlink, Keith.
Oh, is my internet a little spotty?
We lost you for a moment there. You're back now.
Sorry about that.
Let's touch on Alphanomics. We talked about ridges and ridges. Shaq has got this interesting concept of linking ridges alpha to equity. We had Mog and Dubs on a couple of days ago with a very, very innovative 19-page proposal, which we very, very much appreciated. And of course, there are still subnets. We had Synth on yesterday. Synth are talking about they've accumulated a 6-figure treasury, and their goal with that treasury is to nudge Synth into the top 10, top 5 subnets using a very, very simple buyback and burn mechanism. Where do you see the winners there? Which Alphanomics makes sense to you?
In the same way that you're seeing the subnet incentive mechanisms develop, you're seeing the game being played on the Alphanomics at a very, very high level now by our most knowledgeable ecosystem participants. So number one on that is Mog Machine from Hippius. Like, you had him on. Anyone can go listen to the revenue search from 3-4 days ago. Mog has seen hundreds of, not only has he evaluated hundreds of subnets as a validator operator who personally ran his own validator up to 64 subnets and did all the work himself, applied all of the emissions across those subnets himself before dynamic tau. So you have that experience from him. Plus, I pitched him one time on Subnet. He sort of laughed me out of the room. I know how hard it is to get this guy to believe in something. And when I watch him with the conviction that he showed into creating the side chain, parallel, I don't know what you want to call it, the additional substrate chain for Hippius that gives them all kinds of flexibility around the Alphanomics and incentivizing the miners to put skin in the game in order to get access to the revenue and the withholding back of the APR on the alpha that's being locked in, but then releasing that to the wider audience that comes in that isn't mining with their alpha lock. Like, it's a great setup for creating that flywheel. And I think that you'll continue to see subnets evolve in that direction. The whole burn thing that's happening now is just like this very simplest version of that. If you go back like 4 months, like not that many subnets are burning, and now whatever it is, half the subnets are burning or something. And you're going to see the same thing happen that happened on subnets, where everyone's borrowing everybody's code to run a better incentive mechanism. People are going to start borrowing the Alphanomics of the most successful projects in the space in order to, deliver sustainable tokenomics. So, like, I love the buyback and burn. That's an easy one. You got to trust the team to do that. I think Mog's, though, development is really like a huge innovation in this. And Mog's been innovated on 19 when he was part of that team many, many, many times in 2024 and 2023. And I'm excited to see like how fast that sidechain thing kind of moves into other subnets, or even starts getting, even if the Bittensor chain starts taking cues from the developments happening on Hippius's chain and building those flexibilities into Bittensor itself, because I think that's another thing that can happen.
Yeah, I think Mog said that you could do some of what he was doing in Bittensor as it stood, but it was much easier to do it with a separate chain.
And you don't have to ask anybody or get any development clear. You just do it yourself, right? And that's the beauty is when you have somebody that's seen hundreds and evaluated hundreds of subnets, and he's finally got his hands on a couple that he's running himself. It's an awesome experiment to see what someone can do when they have the most possible knowledge on Bittensor to create that flywheel.
And a very good business head, which is rare, because a lot of subnet owners, are giga brain in the coding department, but they've never run a business before or have to articulate what they do, which is a big thing as we've all seen. And one of the things I am just personally really curious about is just the buyback and burn. I know it's like a blunt tool to try and fix the question, which is how do I mitigate or stem the amount of alpha that's smashing into your lick pool. But theoretically speaking, if you have the miner, validator, and speculator sell side over here, if you can match that with buybacks from revenue, buyback and burn, in theory, your alpha price will go up forever. In theory.
That's what I'm saying. Somebody's going to figure that out, and it's going to eat the ecosystem, and then everyone's going to try and catch up and follow. But it'll happen.
Yeah. And so I do keep thinking about this because obviously, in theory, lots of things work in theory. Like the martingale system works in theory, but you need infinite money for that to play out and all that sort of stuff. But I guess you need a subnet which just makes a shit ton of real world revenue that matching all sell side pressure is like a drop in the ocean.
Yeah, speaking of martingale, that's kind of like been my sort of subnet investment strategy up to this point. Like I got involved in February when we launched, and like very slowly got in or whatever. And as detail went along, like I continued to learn lessons and swing harder and harder and harder. And now I have almost no towel left, but on the last couple swings, like I just swung for the fence, like like Barry Bonds or like Hank Aaron going up there and just chopping at the ball. And like that's one of the ways that I think that people are kind of misallocating some of their towel at this point, is maybe this sort of like a shotgun approach to the ecosystem. And it's a little bit easier now that we're near some of subnets at one. But what you need to do is find something, in my experience and how I've stayed above water since being involved since day one, at least from a tau value perspective. I've had many losing subnets as well. Is that you find the thing that you believe in, you create an edge for yourself, and if you don't have one from a coding or technology standpoint, you use your own intuition and your ability to evaluate these things, and you swing as hard as you possibly can at the things that you believe in. And don't follow anybody else's thing. Don't get your information from Twitter. You got to go into the Discord. You got to go into the products themselves if they're available. You got to look at the GitHub. I don't care if you've never looked at one before. Paste it into your favorite AI and ask it what the hell it's talking about, and start to understand what the subnet does. Do not buy based on the chart. I also, just to give some free investment advice, I don't look at any numbers other than the price of the subnet comparative to the sum of subnet prices. I don't care what your market cap is. I don't know what your FDV is. I barely know how many tokens you have in circulation. Sometimes I will look at that. I am aware of what the root prop is, 27, 28% across the top 64 subnets. If you're outside of that, I might check it. If not, I don't look at that either. The most important thing to look at is the price of the subnet in relation to the rest of the ecosystem. And that essentially gets you ahead of the market. And if you figure out that something has 0.5% of all of the emissions, but based on the other subnets that are involved, that it should have 1% or 2%, there's your 2x, there's your 4x, and you hammer that. If you have a 10 tau wallet, you hammer it. If you have 1,000 tau wallet, you hammer it. And that has been the way that I have seen wallets be successful in this ecosystem. And then, then it's up to you. You want to do the PvP thing and get out and try again? Okay. It's going to be hard to find something, though, that you believe in. There's not that many projects, I would say, at this point that I believe in, but they're out there.
Okay, so let's cliche, but let's double click on what you just said with the price of the ratio of the sum of subnets. Can you share on your tau stats here an example or some examples? Because I don't think many people will have cottoned on to that, but it is a good metric.
Yeah, so the sum of subnets is 1.06. That's down here, and you've seen this number can change, right? It's just you take all the prices up there and you add them all up, and that gives you the sum of subnets. So Shoots is roughly 9% or whatever of the total sum of subnet price. The way to look at Shoots then is when I go to shoots.io and I start, clicking around the models and figuring out what this thing is doing, and I understand the plays with the TEE that they're developing and the support that they're providing to every open source developer, on the planet. Does Shoots deserve 9% of Bittensor? That's the question you have to ask yourself. And that in the end determines whether I would buy Shoots or not. And you can go down the line and figure this out. And the thing that you also have to have in mind is like, a lot of these charts, and you can look at any chart from Shoots to 8 of the other top 10 are pretty much straight down. That is unfortunate at this point, but it's a casualty of the Alphanomics that we're involved in. So I would not even look at that at this point, because that's the same across 100 subnets in the ecosystem. So that's essentially the exercise. Like when I'm looking at these subnets and I'm figuring out what I'm going to put my money into, let's go into the second page so we can talk about something fun. I already talked about Hippius and I'm familiar with it, so we'll look at that now. Oh, it's up 100% in the last month. I better stay away from that. Well, you just heard the revenue search where Mog introduced like a totally novel way of Alphanomics and creating the flywheel effect on a subnet that has a real commodity and a price advantage and a relatively like easy ability to match performance. Does Hippius deserve 1.4, 1.3% of the Bittensor emissions, or does it deserve more than that? I don't know. Here's your chart. Like it looks like it's going up. Looks like the community believes in that. Like the other thing that I guess I would look at once I've and I'm really telling you, I don't see any of this trading data when I'm doing this. I don't see any of this emissions data. I don't even look at it. I don't see any of this market cap, volume, FDV. Obviously, max supply is 21 million for everybody. I barely look at any of this stuff as well. I will go to the holder list though, and I will use actually Tau stats for this instead of I will use Tau app for this instead of Tau stats, because the ability to see where the holders are at as far as like how are the top 20, 30 holders of the token treating this subnet? Is it an exit for them? Are they slowly liquidating their bag? Is it diamond hands on the first 10 holders? That's what you want to look at also, because the ecosystem takes its cues from the biggest players. And whether it's 5girl or here's 5girl, or whether it's one of these other wallets, when you see movements happening in the top 10, top 20 on a subnet, a lot of times other subnets will follow. So you only really have to understand the top 30. That's all the information you need. Then you close this page and you go into the GitHub, you go into the Discord, you listen to the podcast, you figure out who you think Mog Machine and the developer Bubs, I think is, or Dubs, I forget his name.
Dubs.
Yeah, you figure out who these guys are and if you believe in them as people and what they're building, and then you swing or you don't, and then you move on. And if you move on, you take the information from your evaluation of Hippius into your next subnet, and you start creating a power ranking yourself. You don't use any of this other information that's available. You have your own. And based on that, doing the hard work of going through this ecosystem, you can create an edge for yourself, because there aren't enough people that are doing that work outside of just absorbing whatever's on X or whatever the latest movements are of alpha. And, it's like, that stuff's just noise, man. If you don't do the work yourself to create your own power ranking on the projects that exist now, until there's better tools available to digest what these guys are doing, that is your edge. And there is an edge there available for everybody if you put the work in.
Amazing. Any thoughts, Mark? I've got loads of questions, but I always feel guilty like hogging.
Well, you don't need to, but yeah, we are similarly. We think the same way about the team, so that's why we spend so long talking to subnet owners as often as we can, and we're constantly on Zooms and calls with subnet owners. And in truth, that's a big part of the reason why we started doing revenue search, because we were having such interesting conversations. It felt like it was right to bring those conversations to the fore, and having revenue search has then allowed us actually to have a bit more access to subnet owners that perhaps would not have spoken to us before. That visibility and credibility has allowed us access that perhaps we wouldn't have been privileged enough to get before. But it is understanding what the subnet is trying to do and taking a view as to whether that team is capable of doing it, that forms the basis of our conviction in any subnet investments that we do, rather than the current state of the price and the emissions and what other people think about it.
It matters very little what the team is going after, as long as it's like a legitimate objective. So many, we've recycled hundreds of subnets that have been going after really cool stuff. So if you're going to buy it based on the cool stuff objective factor and just roll the dice on the team, that's where you can lose some serious money in this project, in my opinion.
Nice.
Yeah, the team is the most important one, but they need to know where they're going.
Yeah, I would also say, though, remember, like, Ridges 4 months ago wasn't even in existence, hardly. They had the slot, but they didn't know where they were going. 6 months ago, they were like just, rudderless out there in the ocean, bouncing around without even knowing where they were sailing. It was like things can turn very quickly if the leader that's involved in the subnet is the right one. And yeah.
Completely agree. So Andre says, "Hey Keith, what is your prediction for the subnets in the next 12 months?" Greets from Switzerland.
If you guys aren't aware, there's a mechanism that's sort of going to prevent much movement below subnet prices 1 that exists with the chain. So I don't think we're going much lower. I think we'll probably float sideways for a little while here, and I think in the next 3 months or so, you'll start to see, once this deregistration mechanism kicks back on, which I believe it was either turned on today or is coming on tomorrow. I think you'll see a house cleaning happening. So you'll lose 40, 50 subnets that are in the existing 128. And I think you'll see a breakout back way above the 0.1 that Shoots is at, or roughly at right now, by a small number of subnets. Whether it's one of the training subnets that hits a home run like 3 or 9, or when it's one of the commodity subnets like Ridges or Hippius.
Nice. I've been thinking about, like, we've met, and I've spoken to so many gigabrain chads in Bittensor. It's quite alarming in such a positive way, and I cannot help but shake the thought that there is going to be at least 1 or 2 subnet owners out there who are insanely smart, that loves game theory optimization. So I love game theory. And I think a lot of people in AI also like game theory. And when I try and think from a first principles perspective of, if I'm a subnet owner, how do I game theory the fuck out of this new game called DTAL? And let's say I had, I don't know, a 2 to 3 year outlook to try and extract as much profit from this as possible. The game plan that I have come up with, not that, I'm not a subnet owner, this is just me speculating when I'm asleep, is that I would set up a subnet and I would be, for the first year or so, sub-average. So not really care about the emissions, let the price, and I'd want to scoot along like the lowest price possible, where I'm not at risk from being deregistered. I get some, emissions, but I'm building something which makes a lot of real world revenue, to the point where when the real world revenue starts pouring in, and when I want to turn on the profit thing, I can then use a lot of that real world revenue to buy up huge amounts of alpha at a very, very low price, therefore getting more alpha, and then start the sort of the rocket ship thing. Do you think anyone's is engaging in that behavior, or am I just going in cuckoo land?
There's definitely people that are planning to engage in that behavior, but whether that equals in 2 years from now or whatever, them actually generating the revenue that they're planning to use to buy back the alpha, that's the question. again, like it goes back to the team. If you look at the top 64 subnets, there's never going to be an opportunity outside of those subnets to match the root prop of them, right?
Yeah.
So they're locked in. And unless you get deregistered, that subnet forever until Bittensor dies, however many years from now, decades from now, will have the best, the lowest root prop. And those subnets will forever be valuable, even if it's not within the existing team that's developing on them today. But when we do eventually take off in a very special way, then people that are ready to launch products will find those subnet slots extremely valuable. So that's why there's still this market for the top 64 or even top 128, even though, we're going to be turning back on registrations. Like you said, that's the smartest strategy, actually. Does anyone have the guts or the ability to pull it off and the runway internally with their own, finances to just like hang on to that slot? I think there's 2 or 3 out there, honestly, and I'm not going to name them, but I think there's 2 or 3, and I have positions in them.
Hey,
so they're out there. Like, and I could be wrong too. Like, and maybe but I don't think so. Because they just look too organized. Sometimes things are really organized, but they're like, it looks like they're like half-assing it. And you're like, I know this guy's way better than this. Why does this look like this? Like, it's like, why isn't he trying? It's like when you see someone like throw a game, it's like, he doesn't normally miss that shot. What's he doing? Like, and I see a little bit of that.
Yeah. So Crypt Nomad says, how do you think the halving will affect both Tau and DTAU prices in general?
You guys are, I'm sure, aware of this, but there's this concept of alpha in and alpha out based upon the halving schedules, and there's a couple different resources to learn more about this. But the problem with the halving is that the alpha out when Tau halves stays the same and the alpha in doesn't, and that essentially creates a selling pressure that's potentially on the mining side, unchanged, while the Tau coming into the pool side gets cut in half. And if you go into the Discord, the Church of Rao channel, you can kind of understand that that's a risk at this point. Now, is that something that's going to cause prices to plummet after the halving on the alpha side? I don't know. Like, I have been in Bittensor on faith for 3 years now, and I continue to put my faith in this project and our developers and the founders and the whole thing, and it always works out every time. So I do believe we will figure out an answer to this, but it does look a little it looks like waters are going to get a little rough around the halving time, at least from an alpha perspective, if you're looking at the way that the traditional buying and selling goes on the mining side today. So risk coming. With risk comes reward. Maybe you'll get a bunch of great entries into subnets. I'm certainly not selling any alpha, preparing for some kind of dump on December 4th or whenever we have, like I don't play that game anyway, but and I wouldn't suggest anyone does, but maybe you'll get a better entry around that time. I don't know,
You're going to say something, Mark?
Well, I was just gonna move us on to a different topic. If you run out of questions there on the YouTube, Keith, what do you think of Siam bringing questions in live on a live podcast like this? What's your take on revenue search more generally?
I actually, after you guys did the Mantis pod, I was like, man, the Mantis dude is sharp, but Mark and Siam are dangerous because you guys have the ability to ask questions that put people on a hot seat that they may not be prepared for. And like, it's easy to talk about your subnets and go down the rabbit hole with all of the technical stuff. But I've always said, in kind of like my internal little Discord where I chat with people about Bittensor, that revenue search is at the same time the most powerful media opportunity for a subnet. It's also the most dangerous opportunity for your subnet. And before you decide to come on and take your swing at revenue search, maybe don't get a second one if it doesn't go really, really well. I know you guys will have people on multiple times, and maybe if they swing and miss on their first one, they get another shot. But honestly, like, you need to treat this thing like what it is, which is the leading platform for people to understand team it's like the best way for anybody to get an idea of who the team is, because it's the longest form conversation that's currently happening in the ecosystem consistently across all of the subnets. So treat this thing like the thing that it is, which is the number one way for people to get an idea about what you're building. And you better come in prepared. Go, just if you want a masterclass on it, watch Mog talk for 45 minutes straight. Like I mentioned to you guys before we did the podcast, like I was listening to the Hippius episode, and I'm like, is this revenue search, or did I switch to Mog's Mog launch a podcast? Because he's just running with his slides and everything. And you already know the questions that you guys are going to ask. You ask a lot of the same questions every time. It's
like 90%.
Yeah, you can come up and just, you have the answers to the test if you write them before you come on the pod. And if you need a couple visuals, like I got to tell you too, man, the hardest thing to do in life is to get onto a podcast like this, or to stand up in front of a group, and to even something that you do every day, to share it confidently and, be an expert at basically sharing information and distributing information and believing in something and passing that on to the listener. It's the hardest thing. That's why getting up and speaking in front of people is like people's second greatest fear or something, other than dying, And before I figured that out in life and like sat down and just like spent hours and hours preparing before I did talks enough to do a couple positive talks where the audience enjoyed it. And then you get the confidence to come up and do the ad lib stuff that you guys do every day, or that I do on my podcast, and allows you to kind of like run your mouth a little bit and give the listener a plug into your actual mind and not sound canned. That's what you want to do. So practice enough before you come on Revenue Search that you can come up here and just riff on the stuff that you know about your own project, and do it in a way that engenders a lot of positivity and belief in what you're building. That's my advice for people.
You've done a lot of your own podcasts. You've been on a lot of other people's podcasts. What's the one thing that we could do that would make Revenue Search more valuable?
I like the personal questions. I mean, it's great to learn about the subnet. I like to learn about the, how these guys think about Bittensor, how they think about the world a little bit. Some of the more kind of like zoomed out perspective stuff outside of the chain and the incentive mechanism, because I like to see how people are framing their subnet development and their involvement in Bittensor in the context of their own little like world building machine. Are they coming into Bittensor in order to, create the ultimate subnet extractive mechanism so that they can get out and go move into the wilderness somewhere? Or are they like here trying to combat the centralized forces that threaten to take over the world? Or are they here to generate a revenue, generating machine that can never be stopped? Or like, what are they trying to do here? And that's, for me, the most interesting thing, is to take somebody's background and the thing that they do every day, which is developing their subnet, and place it into kind of like a perspective aspect of who they are as a person.
I like that. Are there any questions or that you would like us to ask teams in the future that you think would help, other than the general sort of world outlook and whatnot?
Yeah, I like to know which teams that other teams look at as models, or as which GitHubs are they borrowing from? Because that's like, I know, for example, early on, Ridges borrowed from 44, right? And I love to know, like, yeah, we look at the old or we look at the GitHub from whatever other subnet, and we borrow from that. Or which, when they have questions on how to develop their incentive mechanism, who do they go to for advice? Or are they just out there winging it? Like, because a lot of times, and you guys, of course, will know this, your mentor is sometimes the most important person in shaping your life. And if you talk to people that are successful, mentors tend to have a hugely outsized influence on the success or failure of an individual. And so that, for me, is an important aspect of what they're building.
Yeah, I completely agree. And what you said about the revenue search being dangerous, it is valid, because there's been some weird sort of side effects which we did not foresee coming, because it starts off as a simple idea. Hey, how can DSV help? How can we be a megaphone, like a foghorn for subnet owners? Because at the moment that go back a few months, it was hard for subnet owners to get their message across to, you know, a bigger audience or audiences not within Bittensor. So we thought, hey, we could try our best. And, you know, now we've got, I mean, right now we have 1,100 live viewers here. So it's grown a lot faster than we thought. And then, like, I used to announce, hey, we're interviewing Subnet blah blah at this time and date. And then what happened? All the degens started front running everyone else. I'm like, fuck's sake. We're trying to be net positive contributors here. And so now we don't announce that. So I'm trying to reduce the amount of green, you know, dildo candles and red ones. And the questions that Mark and I ask, like 90% of the time, are identical. Who are you? What do you do? What is your, like? We'll ask that question a lot. What do you actually do? What problem are you solving? And yeah, so we're trying.
You guys do an awesome job. In fact, the intro that you have now, which you dropped maybe 10 episodes ago or something, just a little like 90-second clip. It's fun. It gets me excited to like listen to the podcast. Like, I think those parts when you guys, like Mark, when you're giving Siam shit about the tree in the background, like I listen to that intro just to hear the joke about the tree every time, because I just like to like.
The problem is that the joke about the tree is the last thing that we hear before we go live, and we're still laughing at us and ourselves and then we're like that. Oh, and now we've got to do a live revenue search, and we're laughing about Siam's stupid plastic tree. So
you guys do a great job of that, and it's sort of like the All In podcast a little bit. Like, the topics are very serious, you know, but there's always an opportunity to poke a little fun at everybody, whether it's just you two or at the subnet owner, and that's easy. That's why you got to come on this thing prepared as a subnet owner, so that you can have a light conversation. Because if you come on and everybody's worried, and Mark and Siam, you don't want to ask the wrong question because these guys are starting to feel like a little bit nervous or whatever, and there's a lot of like dead air on the thing. You got to come on prepared so you can have a light conversation that comes across well to the audience. That's another, you know, responsibility of the guest.
Yeah, a bit of preparation, I think, is the key. Watch a couple of episodes, get a bit of a feel for it, understand what the questions are likely to be. And Mog was saying that he the day before revenue search, he was up at 6, didn't get to bed till 2 a.m. and he was just doing prep for revenue search. 19 really clean, well thought out, well laid out slides. It was a masterclass.
Yeah.
To the point where I was asking a question based on the slide, and he was like, "Next slide, Siam." Oh, sorry, but Bonk, what next slide? And he thought of it. So
there's a general sort of like lack of attention paid to people's media presence and marketing presence at this point, and whether it's everybody's sandbagging Siam, like you mentioned, or whether it's just a lack of awareness that this is just as every media, you know, exposure that you get is just as important as what's happening in the background with your incentive mechanism, or it's maybe even more important, you know, and you got to create the ability to translate your message effectively.
Nice. So another question here from Crypto Nomad, another good one. If revenue is the key for teams, well, not for every team, how can we as an ecosystem support teams that may have an amazing product but need more time to revenue? We might squash great ideas that need time. Yes, I completely agree.
Who's been squashed that needs time? I guess that's the, you know.
Let me rephrase that question. Take like game-changing subnets, things that will really put eyeballs onto Bittensor or change the world or the future of AI. Templar, IOTA, Metanova. Some of these, they're nowhere near revenue, and they won't be revenue driving. Like if you take IOTA and Templar, the moment they can create an equally sized param model to OpenAI, but trained or pre-trained, distributed, like centralized AI won't be able to catch up. It's a bit like if a centralized company wanted to create the hash rate of Bitcoin, no chance in hell. So like these subnets, they won't have revenue for a long time, but they need our support.
Yeah, for sure. If you look at the largest wallets in Bittensor and who they support, you will see that there is plenty of support for subnets that are not generating revenue. Go look at the top holder list for 3 or 9 or any other
They're all
subnet.
Jake's wallets.
Not all of them.
Oh, really?
But So like, yeah, I mean, Jake's in almost everything. If you look at the, if you have that information, but what I'm saying is that you know, the runway is there. By the way, why do you need a subnet slot then? Like, if you don't have your GitHub like up and running, you haven't been on testnet, do not come in and burn a couple months trying to get your footing before you like. And now we have this new registration thing where you have 4 months of immunity. You better come in swinging. And if you have a good idea, like, you're going to be able to convince people that's something if you can translate it effectively. So you need to work on your messaging. It's not a question of are you going to get support, because nobody's kicked on the flywheel yet in the whole ecosystem. Not a single subnet.
Yeah.
So at this point, like, all we are still is potential. And I don't think there's any, like, give me I would ask that guy for an example. Give me an example. And then if they give me one and I really think that's a great idea, then they need to work on translating that message into something that the alpha community can get behind.
I mean, I think it's a very, very simple question with a very, very, very simple answer. And the simple answer is if they haven't got revenue, they get supported through emissions. And the way that you get emissions is by articulating your vision really effectively and saying, this is coming, but it's not coming for 2 years. And if you can send enough people on the dream, and you'll get the emissions.
Yeah.
Simple.
This ecosystem, and probably 70 or 80% of the tokens held are in the hands of dreamers. That's why they're in Bittensor. Like, yes, it's crypto and everyone's trying to make a buck and do whatever, but this project since day one has been people that saw the potential first in the, you know, the way the chain's constructed and everything like that. And now it's in the subnets. And so you'll have no problem getting that buy-in.
Keith, how would you recommend Mark and I get more eyeballs and more capital into Bittensor? Because we're trying.
The capital part, you know, outside of the consumer, you guys are going to know that part better than me. I did, you know, a couple dozen calls throughout my time as a validator. Done one recently with larger funds that are interested in Bittensor that want, you know, essentially someone who's had their hands on the ecosystem to give them a walkthrough. I can convince people to put millions of dollars into Bittensor. I know you can too. That's not the thing that we need, though, is the consumer. And there are a couple tools and apps being developed around that. You know, we'll have one coming out hopefully next month from Tau.com that should be the gateway for decentralized AI for a consumer, for an average person to get exposure into artificial intelligence outside of, you know, just the FANG or whatever the top investments are now in the public space. So the way that you guys can help with that, though, is to provide the media that can be easily plugged into these platforms so that when somebody's looking at an alpha investment or a subnet investment, you are kind of the go-to platform for consumer digestion of the second level. Like, the first level is the 60, 90 second, you know, highlight hit. And then the second level is, where's a podcast where I can listen to what Shoots is building? And that's you guys. It's easy. And you guys are great at communicating it. So that's you. Just keep doing what you're doing. The rest will come. You're seeing the growth. It's actually really hard to get 1,000 live viewers on X. We don't even get 1,000 people watching some of the novelty searches, do we? Like, aren't you guys beating? Yeah. I mean, at least in the Discord, there's like, sometimes there's 80 people, you know, or 120 people.
I can never watch novelty search. I'm always putting the kids to bed during novelty search. I always have to watch the recordings.
I'd be surprised if you weren't ahead of novelty search at this point.
Oh, well, cool. Tau.com, say more.
Yeah, basically, it's an organization that's putting every single, you know, cannon on its ship aimed at delivering the easiest way for you to get alpha as a regular person, as someone that's interested in artificial intelligence, sees the wave coming, not sure what to do about it, wants a little exposure to it. But, you know, honestly, the rails to get money into Bittensor at this point are still pretty on a pretty steep incline. You know, the goal with tau.com is to just hand the people the skis and send them down the mountain into Bittensor, and hopefully not down the chart as well. But you know, that's the goal. And from my perspective, having been involved in a, you know, giant organization in my previous corporate career, the development and developments to support that organization with hundreds of millions and even billions spent on them, the professionalism and the development track that I'm seeing the application go down with tau.com, and the usability of it with an internal version that we have out now, is going to be a completely different delivery method for new people to get into the ecosystem. And I'm excited about that. That's why I sold. That's why I transferred the validator to those guys back then, as I saw that need for us to put some more professionalism around delivering tools into the hands of the consumer in the ecosystem. That's essentially what Bittensor is missing. At this point, even on the subnet side, there's only a handful of subnets that have it, but the end product, your intelligence commodity, needs to be consumable by an average user, and Bittensor needs to be accessible for an average person, and that's what tau.com is doing. So look for it next month, or maybe, I would say 30 days, 45 days from now.
Sweet.
Yeah, that sounds like that's going to really address a need. If there's anything that we can do to help or support, let us know.
Yeah, I got the alpha invitation, I think, coming to you, Siam. So Mark, if you want one, just drop me an email address, and you guys can kick the tires on that thing before it gets out to the wider public.
Yep, would love to. That would be good. Cool. Any more questions flying in there, Siam? We're well over our 15-minute deadline. We haven't done that for so long. How stupid are we thinking that we were going to be able to ask all the questions and all be done, wrapped up in a quarter of an hour? No.
Yeah.
I'll just finish with one thing. Is there's you know, a lot of people are worried about the token price. We're back under 300, I think was the movement that happened last night or today. The metric that you need to be looking at when you're involved in Bittensor is what percent of the emissions that are being distributed to subnets are going to valuable development that's adding utility and interest into Bittensor itself. And if you go back and you know enough about the project, and it takes a while to get to that point, you can chart maybe the alpha charts are going down, but I'm telling you, the application of emissions into useful development chart is just up and to the right. And maybe a year ago, we were at less than 10%. I don't know what we were at, you know. 2 years ago, we were at like 3% or something. Now I'd say that like somewhere around 30-40% of the emissions are going into projects that are going to be here for the long haul, that are developing things that will change the fabric of open source artificial intelligence for years to come. And that's the number, that's the metric that you want to be looking at when you're considering an investment into Bittensor. And from my perspective, I've never seen it stronger than it is today.
Yeah, it feels like it's really rocketed up in the last 2 months. It feels like lots of people have got to the point where they've got revenue. You know, we have people contacting us, right, got some revenue. How are we going to announce it? What are we going to do with it?
What do I do with this revenue? I better call Revenue Search and figure out what to do with it.
I'm telling you, those are the messages we get.
No joke. That
it shows you where we're at. You know, we're just it's just a bunch of garage bands, man. And they just signed their first like record deal. That's like what this is. They're like, I got 500K. Like, what do I do with it? I'm going to go buy a truck or on Revenue Search. Yeah. Steer those boys in the right direction. Buy back and burn, or, you know, take the MOG model and get your side chain going, whatever you need to do.
Yeah. And it's like the S&P 500. All of the value of the S&P 500 is in the Mag 7. The S&P 493, tumbleweed.
Right.
Flatline. Right. Yeah. Well, listen, we're going to have to end this somewhere, because I suspect that you two could just trundle on for another 2 hours, and that's no help to anybody. I think, because then they won't listen to it. They won't listen. I know this week I've seen a couple of comments like that. Oh, another Revenue Search. That's good news. The bad news is I'm 2 episodes behind already. We have been prolific this week, smashing them out. But this has been another good one. So Keith,
It's been a pleasure, guys. Thank you for having me on.
No, thank you.
I love what you're doing. And honestly, when I said that in the beginning, passing on the torch, you guys have the podcast torch at this point. No question. The level of professionalism, the question, that's the interaction, the feeling on here. It's great. I love it.
Well, thank you.
Doing good work.
I still think Mark Jeffries' Hash Rate is the best podcast, but thank you. So
we're top 10, and that's all that matters. That's all that matters. But it's been good.
Yeah.
Keith, will you come back on and again another time for us?
Yeah, you know, at some point I'm happy to come back on and we can just go through the subnets one by one, and I'll just download into your, listener's ear every piece of information I've got on the top of my head for we'll go through the top 50 or whatever you guys want to do. Yeah,
you've really made a rod for your own back there, because I think people are going to want to see that. Siam's going to want to see that. I suspect you might be back on Tuesday.
Right.
That could be good.
Yeah. All right, guys.
Gotta love you and leave you. Cheerio, folks.
Thanks, guys.
See you, boys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.